So, hello and welcome to this discussion this afternoon. And I know it's lunch for some of you. And of course, today we are discussing the issues relating to bushmeat. Now, let me admit, I like bushmeat because it tastes nice. But again, you see, I also wasn't aware that there's what is called illegal and legal bushmeat. So, what I've done today is that we have brought you a guest who is going to help us understand and go through this issue of bushmeat. Now, in the meantime, what you do is that tell us where you're watching us from. Also, tell me if the sound is good, and tell us where you're watching us from. Tell us if the sound is good, so that as we start this conversation, we are all in tandem. Janet, Ale Dimwanza, good afternoon. Good to see you. Juanita. All right. Beatrice, you're welcome. So tell us, where are you watching us from? And okay, somebody watching us from Kitwe, and that's Esther Mansa. Right. So let me bring in my guest so that we can get started. Louis, you're welcome.
Good afternoon, Doctor. How are you?
Good afternoon. I hope I didn't disturb your lunch.
No, not at all.
Because you know how it is when you're running a very busy schedule, you take what the day gives you. So for me, the day has given me my lunch break, and I thought that, why not have a conversation with you?
I really appreciate it, and the rest of the team appreciates it as well. So lunch will be had whenever lunch is had.
I agree. I hope you are not starving.
No, no, no. However, if I collapse, it's probably nerves more than it is hunger.
I see. And I hope you are drinking water.
Right here. There we go.
All right. So, Louis Guluka, welcome. Now, tell us, uh, who is Louis Guluka?
All right. So Louis Guluka is a young woman, relatively speaking. She's a Zambian with a bit of an interesting history. So I was born in Zambia, but I spent the first 20 plus years of my life living in Botswana. And I grew up in a town called Maun, which is right next to the Okavango Delta, if you've ever heard of the famous Okavango Delta. And because of that, I grew up next to wildlife and animals, and that heavily impacted my life, my education, and who I have become today. So I'm sure as we talk, you'll see that I'm very passionate about wildlife and talking about protecting our wildlife, and that is because of who I am and where I grew up.
I see. So now, tell us about this organization that you represent. Which organization are you on about?
I work for an organization called Wildlife Crime Prevention, and as the name states, we are all about helping Zambians prevent wildlife crime, so helping them prevent themselves from being engaged in illegal activity. I think when we think about wildlife crime, we usually think about poaching, but there are lots of other ways to be involved in crime. For example, today we'll focus mostly on illegal bushmeat. But as an organization, we work with the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, which most of you know as ZAWA. And our work is to help them do the good work that they do. So we partner with them on various projects, and particularly the work that I do is in sensitizing Zambians, as I said, and educating them on the value of wildlife, why we need to protect our natural resources, and why we need to become ambassadors for wildlife.
I see. Anyhow, now you are running a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what this campaign is about.
So for the last 4 years, I'm going into 5 years now, we've been working with the Department of National Parks and Wildlife on a campaign called This Is Not a Game. And the campaign is obviously a play on words because it's heavily centered around educating Zambians on the dangers of illegal bushmeat and encouraging them to consume legal game meat instead. So we are all over. We are on radio, we are on TV, we are on social media as we are today, with the message that Zambians should not consume illegal bushmeat, that illegal bushmeat is dangerous and carries diseases, and that you're better off protecting your health and your family's health by consuming legal game meat.
All right, so fine. So why should people be bothered about your campaign? Why should we be interested?
I think people should be interested for many reasons, but particularly because I'm talking to a doctor and medical expert, we will focus on health today. And unfortunately, the nature of illegal game meat, as it is with any illegal product, is that it's unregulated. So, unlike food that enters your kitchen through legal means, you are certain where it has come from. For example, if you were to walk into any grocery store today and buy food, you usually have labeling at the back that will tell you what exactly is in that product that you're consuming, how much of carbohydrates, protein, or anything else you're consuming, but also, most importantly, where it was produced. So that if anything goes wrong, if for whatever reason you are unhappy with the quality of the product you have been given, you know who produced it, where it came from, even for some products, what time exactly it was produced and in which factory, so that you can report to the relevant authorities and make sure that your health is protected. Unfortunately, that is not the case with illegal bushmeat. So when we talk about illegal bushmeat, firstly, we're talking about a product that comes from an illegal source. And most of this meat is coming from protected areas. So as a nation, we have designated certain areas that are considered protected. They are national parks or they are game management areas. And we've said that the wildlife in these areas is for protection. So whether it's for you on your holiday, enjoying with your family, or whether it's just that it's an important biodiversity center or an ecosystem and we want to protect it. We have various reasons for this criteria, but we say these animals are not for consumption. They are for nature and they are to be preserved. What happens though is, unfortunately, people, in an attempt to source illegal bushmeat, will enter those protected areas and they will slaughter animals. And the problem with that is the way that they cull these animals or they kill these animals is also not safe. So again, when we later on we'll talk more about legal game meat. But when we talk about legal game meat, we know what animal it is, we know where it has come from, and we know that it has been killed in humane ways and in ways that are safe for human consumption. When we talk about illegal bushmeat, we're talking about animals that have either been killed by handmade, homemade shotguns, and also usually using wire snares. So these are traps that humans create using wire and place them all over protected areas. And any animal that finds itself in that place is going to be captured. And the problem with that is that you're hunting indiscriminately. You're not thinking about, is this the right animal? Is it the right gender? Is it the right age? You're just getting anything and everything that falls into that trap. And then, because of the nature of wire snares, the animal then slowly dies a painful death, usually begins decomposing, and that's when a poacher will come and get that animal, dress it, and then they will smoke dry the meat. And as Zambians, most of us like smoke dried meat. We like that flavor. But the problem with smoke drying meat is it's done mostly to preserve the meat and also to disguise what meat it is, what species it is, and even how the animal may have died and be decomposing. So then that meat is then taken and smuggled, because again it's illegal, into cities like Lusaka and then sold on to you as a consumer. So again, the problem with that is, going back to the scenario we used where there's food in your grocery store or in your local butchery, that meat has been transported safely to you, and there have been lots of health and safety protocol that you may not be aware of, but that has gone to ensuring that that meat is safe. So that if for whatever reason the food that you're consuming is not safe, we can trace it back and say, oh, well, I consumed let's say T-bone. I consumed this T-bone from this place at this time, but I found that actually it made me sick. Let's trace the person who sold it to us. Let's even trace the farmer. We can even sometimes trace the exact animal it came from. With illegal bushmeat, none of that is possible. Again, you don't know what you're eating, you don't know what animal it is, you don't know who prepared it, how they prepared it, and you don't know whether they themselves had diseases and that they might have transmitted to you, or if the animals themselves had diseases. So I know I've said a lot in a very short space of time, but that is why we should be talking about illegal bushmeat.
Right. Now, of course, for me, from a medical standpoint, when you're talking about illegal bushmeat, the first thing that comes to my mind is, especially when you talk about safety issues, I'm worried more about diseases. But then the question is, apart from diseases, is there another reason? Are there other reasons why people should be concerned about illegal bushmeat?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up diseases, and I hope we get to talk about it more and you get to explain more as a professional what you think. But like you said, parking diseases for aside for a bit, you also have, like I mentioned, the fact that this meat is unsanitary. So you don't even know what it is that you're eating. There are certain species that you don't, as an individual, want to be consuming. Maybe you have been told this is kudu meat, or more popularly, buffalo meat. Unfortunately, if you look at the statistics or the population of buffalo in Zambia, there is no way all of these people who say they're selling buffalo meat are selling buffalo meat. They're selling you something that you might not want to eat. They might be selling you a giraffe, they might be selling you a zebra if you're lucky. But more importantly, they might even be selling you lion meat or even dog meat. In fact, recently there was a case of a man in Kabwe who was arrested by police because he was selling dog meat disguised as bush meat. So you don't know what you're eating. You can't be certain that it is good for you. And then we could also talk about, the environmental problems with eating meat that has been harvested unsustainably. We can also talk about the corruption that goes into making sure that these products enter Lusaka, because they are illegal products. They're not being transported through the usual safe method. So when you're consuming illegal bushmeat, not only are you promoting poaching, you're also promoting corruption, and generally you're promoting the disintegration of the health and safety world that makes sure that food that you should be eating ends up where it should be.
So let's talk about wildlife in general. All right. And also wildlife in terms of economics. Tell us, how does preservation or conservation of wildlife help to contribute to economic well-being of the country?
Well, it's great that you brought that up. Just before this session, I was in a team building session or in a discussion with some of my colleagues, and we were talking about just that. How do we show Zambians that the wildlife economy is more than just tourism? Because one of the things I know we often talk about is, oh, we should preserve these wildlife, these animals because they bring in forex. I think that's something that most of us understand. Tourists will come from abroad, will view these animals, and then they'll give us money. But right now we're in a pandemic. Most people aren't traveling. For some countries, they're in their third, fourth, fifth wave of coronavirus. No one is going anywhere. So does that mean that that wildlife is now no longer valuable because people can come and see it? No, that is not the case. Aside from domestic tourism, which is also really important, I think we are now seeing, as we talk, especially about things like climate change, that the ecosystem is very important, that the way God created this planet is that there's a relationship between plants and animals and even us, and that when you remove one thing from the ecosystem, you suddenly start seeing a lot of different problems that you're having. For example, with the illegal bushmeat trade, one of the challenges that we have is that when you remove, for example, many prey species, a lot of the bushmeat that we're removing is food for other wildlife like lions and leopards. When you remove a huge portion of the food that they're supposed to be eating, those animals start starving to death. But those animals play an important role, and one of them is disease control. They are responsible for getting the weak species out of the ecosystem or the diseased animals out of the ecosystem. And when you no longer have that balance, you start seeing a lot of zoonotic diseases that we are now seeing cropping up, emerging because we have disrupted the ecosystem. Also, if a particular species, for example, herbivores, are responsible for managing the amount of grass or the amount of certain plants in the ecosystem, those plants could also be responsible for the number of a particular insect that you see in the ecosystem. And before you know it, you might have a big plague or you might have pest control issues. So wildlife is important for so many different reasons, some of which are directly financially, bringing money into our pockets, but some of them are more bigger issues and issues of do we even have a planet to live on, or will our children have a planet to live on if we continue the way we're going?
Right. You see, at some point, we will take some comments and questions from the attentive audience so that you can attend some of the comments. But before we do that, I'm sitting here wondering to myself, um, you've talked about somebody in Kawe who was found selling illegal bushmeat that turned out to be dog meat.
Mhm.
And you also mentioned that some people, who bring about this illegal, bushmeat sometimes may supply animals that are actually not edible for human consumption, or rather, that are not suitable for human consumption. But the question is, where can people find legal bushmeat?
I think that's a very important question, and it's probably the number one question that we have. So everybody will say, yes, I agree. I don't want to be eating these animals. I don't know what it is. It's not safe. Where can I find legal game meat? So if you go onto our Facebook page, This Is Not a Game, or if you go onto our Instagram page, or even if you visit our website, www.thisisnotagame.info, we have a list of accredited legal licensed outlets across the country. Right now, both of us are in Lusaka, so we could talk about Lusaka. There's legal game meat being sold, for example, at Delicasa Butchery, which is opposite Levy Mall. There is legal game meat being sold at Eliado Butchery in Long Acres. There's legal game meat being sold at Skanza Thrift Butchery, which I think most of us know where Skanza is. So there's outlets popping up all over the country. There's bushmeat being sold on the Copper Belt in Mazabuka in Northern Province. Of course, this is a new industry, so it might not be as available as we would like it to be. But time and time again, we're seeing more and more outlets opening up as Zambians wake up to the fact that they need to be consuming legal game meat.
There could be a young entrepreneur listening to us who may think or feel that, okay, it seems there's a demand for bushmeat and may want to get into the business. So how does one go about, opening an outlet for legal bushmeat?
Well, the first thing is you have to get in contact with the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, and we have also made that easy for you. Again, you can reach out to us on our social media page, send us a message on Facebook, send us a message on Instagram, or send us an email via our website. We are constantly connecting people who want to sell legal game meat to the Department of National Parks and Wildlife. And sometimes, because one of our partners is the Wildlife Producers Association of Zambia, so this is a collective of wildlife producers, of game farmers, we also connect them to game farmers who can supply them with legal game meat. So the short answer is please reach out to us if you're interested, if you're at home and you want to start this business, and we can help you with who to contact, who to talk to at the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, what licenses you need, and we want you to be a success. So we do this service entirely for free. We're not going to charge you any money to help you because our job is to help you start your next legal game meat business.
Right. So if you're listening out there and you want to get into this business of supplying legal game meat, you've heard for yourselves. Now, I know people have been following this conversation from the time we started talking, and others are probably thinking to themselves, what if someone knocks at my door and they're selling, bushmeat, and I suspect it's illegal? What should they do?
Well, what I would advise is if you suspect, one, ask for a license. If they don't have a license, just close the door. It's not worth it. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, you mentioned that as a doctor, your biggest concern is diseases. And I think in this day and age, we already have so many challenges that we don't need to be opening the door for more health challenges. We already have blood pressure problems, we already have diabetes. We don't need to be infecting our families with diseases. Even if you suspect, and I know the challenge with legal game meat can be sometimes it's someone you know, someone you trust, someone you've been selling from, or rather, who's been selling to you, been buying for years. All it takes is one time. It only can take one piece of meat to make you and your family sick. So my advice would be say no. And if you can, report that person to the Department of National Parks and Wildlife. Make sure that they serve a penalty, because also they are ultimately encouraging poaching, but they're also putting an unsafe product on the market. Usually when someone sells drugs or they sell something else that's illegal, we're very quick to understand that that person is doing something bad and they should serve the consequences for their actions. But I think sometimes when it comes to bushmeat, we become a little hesitant.
I see what you mean. Can they report to the police?
You can absolutely report to the police. You can also report to the Department of National Parks and Wildlife. Again, we're on social media, so it's always easier for me to say, okay, report to this number, report to the Department of National Parks Facebook page, report to us, and we'll make sure that that query or that concern is followed up.
Good. Now, before we take questions and comments from our audience, how can people access this campaign that you're on?
As I said, the best way to access it is via social media. And since we're all on Facebook, we're watching this on Facebook, I would say the first thing you should do after this is search for This Is Not a Game on Facebook. You'll instantly see it. It's very visible. We've used very distinctive colors, the black and the red. So visit us on our Facebook page. But you can also access our campaign by going to www.thisisnotagame.info. And like I said, that's where you'll find information on the illegal bushmeat trade. You'll also find a list of accredited suppliers, and we're always updating that.
Good. So now let's take some questions and comments from our audience.
Okay.
All right. I saw some very interesting interventions. Let's see. Okay, that question is not related to what we are discussing. Okay, let's see. What questions do people have? I thought I saw some interventions. Okay, this one is interesting, although it's somewhat medical, but it's an interesting because of what the question is saying. This is Jason Banda, and his concern is that the last time I consumed legal, okay, not illegal, legal bushmeat or game meat, and I reacted with a rash. So game meat is off the menu for me. What's your comment on that?
Well, the first thing I would say is I'm glad that he said it was legal. I hope that he has evidence of that. I would first ask him, like, how are you sure that this meat was legal? Did you see a certificate to sell? Did you see the legal game meat sticker? Did you ask for any other evidence that this meat was legal? But if that is the case, that he consumed legal game meat and he knew exactly what it was and he reacted, I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to defer to you on this one, Dr. Mujajati. But perhaps he just should not be eating certain types of animals. I think there's people who just don't eat pork, or they can't eat beef, or they can't eat a certain type of fish. So I'm sorry to hear that he can't eat it, but I'm glad that he is certain that his reaction is just to bushmeat and not to something that could have been dangerous in the meat.
Yeah, you see, you know why I put up this question? This question underscores the fact that, look, sometimes people can actually have medical reactions to legal game meat, but it can get worse with illegal game meat. And I think that's the issue I was trying to see if we can discuss. And I'm glad that you've handled the question very well. The other issue here is that if somebody has bought legal game meat and they react like this, what steps should they take? Of course, they got the hospital fine and they find that they are safe. But from the industry process or industry protocol of game meat, what should they do? Do they report to the place where they bought the meat? Where do they take the concern?
Yeah, I think that is a valid concern. If for whatever reason you react, and this is why I was talking about earlier about knowing the source of your food. So in this case, Mr. Jason Banda, who bought legal game meat, it's very clear on where he got it, and he can go back and say, "Look, I bought meat from X butchery on this day at this time. Here's my receipt. Excuse me, I got a rash. Can you explain to me why? Is it possible that there was something wrong with the meat, which is not likely? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt, but perhaps there is. But also, like you rightly said, now he at least can be certain that his reaction is to the meats and not any disease in the meat, that he knows what he ate and why he ate it, and that he has that peace of mind. It's unfortunate, but at least he has a peace of mind. And now at least he knows even what species it was. So maybe it's that he should not be eating kudu. And he can go back and say, okay, from now on, when I come here, please, I don't eat kudu, but I'm still willing to try buffalo meat. I'm still willing to try impala or whatever other species they are available.
I like that because you see, I think you raise an important point. The point that you raise is that you cannot put not all bush meat is the same. So the fact that he reacted to one type of bushmeat, it doesn't mean that he will react to all bushmeat. Jason, I hope you're listening. The fact that you reacted to what you reacted to does not mean that you will react to all bushmeat, because bushmeat is not one species. There are different types of animals. So maybe there's a specific type of animal that you reacted to. Please bear that in mind. And also, this is what underscores the advantages, and I'm sure you agree with me. This is what underscores the advantage of legal bushmeat, is that if you've reacted to a meat that you ate and it's wild, or it's bushmeat and it's legal, you can go back to the supplier and they'll be able to tell you, oh, sir, this is the animal you were eating. But if it were illegal, you don't have that option, because the person who sold you probably is already long gone. They also probably don't even know what you're eating, and you don't even know what animal you're reacting to. So this underscores the advantages of consuming bushmeat from established outlets. That way you are able to tell what you're actually eating. And in the unlikely event that you have a reaction like this, at least you'll be able to know what you ate. And next time you go to buy bushmeat, Jason, please check, make sure that you don't buy the same meat you bought last time. This time around, probably go and buy hippo. Or someone was asking me, is in Beba bushmeat?
It depends. I was this person from Eastern Province.
Well, somebody put it up, and I was thinking, okay, next time I have you on, I'll probably ask you that. Is in Beba bushmeat?
I personally wouldn't classify it as so, but it still was not something I personally, I want to be clear, would recommend people eat without being sure. I'm definitely a supporter of knowing where everything that you eat comes from. You
But you
need
know
to
what
be
Imbeba
very,
is?
yes, exactly. The little, I think they're rats. In other places, they're called grass cutters sometimes.
They are rats. This okay, they're not rats. I'm sure my
Yeah.
friends from Eastern Province would disown me that you called Imbeba rats, because they refuse that it's not rats. Uh,
Whatever it is, I'm not a fan, unfortunately.
now, here's some criticism for you. Okay.
Mhm.
Peter Chikondi Banda is saying God is going people. Okay, fine. I think he's saying God is going to punish, quote
Mhm.
unquote. I've been said, that's my own insertion or my own understanding.
Mhm.
God is going to punish who, in the name of protecting wildlife, cause other people to starve when there is abundance to feed.
I'm
Are you
glad.
are you in your campaign? Are you denying people food?
I'm glad that he brought that up. He mentioned abundance, and I would ask Peter Chikondibanda about the abundance of wildlife. How certain are we that wildlife is actually abundant? Because when you look at the statistics, they'll tell you that the illegal bushmeat trade has depleted wildlife populations across Zambia. So where there used to be thousands and thousands of animals, there's now just a tiny number. So for example, just yesterday there was a press release that came out about 4 men who were convicted of illegal possession of lechwe meat, and they had gotten that meat from a national park somewhere in the Blue Lagoon area, so near Mazabuka. And the problem with that meat was that it was a lechwe. So Zambia has a species of lechwe called the Kafua lechwe. That species is found nowhere else in the world. You cannot find the Kafua lechwe anywhere else in the world. And over the last couple of decades, that population has decreased by almost 90%. We have depleted the Kafua lechwe to where there's a population of a couple of thousand left, where there used to be hundreds of thousands. Now, that means that we are the problem. Where we think there is abundance, there's abundance for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but the problem is if you are reaping where you are not sowing, if you're not protecting your species, how do you know that there's abundance? And that's the beauty of game farms or legal game meat. And game farms come in different types. There's game farms that are privately owned, and more recently, we've even seen community game farms where Zambians come together as a community, as a village or a group of people and start a game farm. And the beauty of that is they're looking at wildlife populations. They say, okay, we have this many. How many can we sustainably remove and be left with enough for future generations? So, what I would say to someone like Mr. Banda is let's do more research into how populated our national parks are. The reason this exists and the reason now more and more you see more people talking about poaching is because they aren't. I think all of us, if we talk to our grandparents, they'll talk about many areas where wildlife used to just be in abundance. Right now, I'm in Leopard's Hill, and people say it was called Leopard's Hill because there were leopards here. I have never seen a leopard here. And I would argue that most of us who live in Lusaka have never seen a leopard outside of a national park. So there's lots of places where there used to be an abundance of wildlife and that no longer exists. So just to give you some statistics, we did a survey a couple of years ago, and we found that more than 2,000 tons of illegal bushmeat are consumed every year. So if you are taking 2,000 tons out of national parks just for Lusaka, and that was a modest estimate, how much wildlife do we have that we can eat 2,000 tons year after year after year, and the numbers are just the wildlife is populating as quickly as we are consuming?
I see. More criticism for you to deal with.
Oh,
Kampamba, Oliver. So Imwe, you just want the whites and rich politicians to be the only ones eating our bushmeat tea.
I think that is a valid concern. We talk a lot about inequality these days, and we know that historically, wildlife and certain resources were only for the rich or for, I want to stay away from racial lines, but for people of means. But that is not the case anymore. And if you look at legal outlets, and if you were to visit some of the legal places that we talk about, this meat is coming from Zambian farms run by Zambian people. And I just talked about a community game farm. Those are not rich people. And I think this is a valid concern that bushmeat, illegal bushmeat, helps poor people come out of poverty. But the problem with crime is it doesn't. Research shows that usually people get poorer. If someone is poaching, they're putting their lives at risk. One, you're going into a national park with wild animals. There's elephants there, there are lions there. It's dangerous. If you make it out alive, you then have to deal with the law, because rightly so, there are penalties. Like I mentioned, for example, the Kafua lechwe is a protected animal. And so the penalties for being found in possession of a Kafua lechwe is different for the penalties of being found with another animal. So if you get arrested, that's 5 years away from your family, 5 years that you cannot be supporting the family that desperately needs you, that you cannot provide income to, or whatever other support. So when we buy legal game meat, we are supporting Zambian-owned businesses. And game farms are not about just making one man rich. Game farms employ dozens of people. A lot of the game farms I've been to even have other resources. They have schools on the premises. They have clinics on the premises. So they're not just making one man rich, they're impacting a whole community around them. And game farms also pay taxes, the same taxes that make it possible for us to have roads, the same taxes that make it possible for us to have free education. So ultimately, when you support a legal business, you are not just supporting yourself and making sure that you and your family are safe. You are taking kids to school, you're making sure that people get medication, and you are building your community.
This is an interesting comment. I don't know whether you can take care of it, but you're not a licensing entity, but I think it's an interesting observation. What is the department doing to ensure hunting licenses are affordable for an ordinary Zambian? Ask so because for illegal meat to stop, licenses should be affordable.
I'm glad that you mentioned that we are not a licensing agency, so I think that this is very dangerous territory for me to tread on and to speak on matters that I'm not an expert on. So I'll focus more on the legal game meat aspect of it. And I think a lot of people think, well, if licenses were cheap, then we could all go into national parks, we could all hunt, and we'd all have lots of game meat. Except if licenses were cheap and we all had game meat and we could all hunt, there wouldn't be any animals left. So it's just something to think about.
Where is that? What is the essence of preserving wildlife and how beneficial is it to us? I like this question.
I like it too, because I think sometimes when people think about preserving wildlife, particularly because most of us Zambians, the reality is we haven't been to a national park. We haven't seen this wildlife for ourselves. We know that it's something that earlier, a couple of comments ago, someone was talking about the wealthy or rich politicians. They're the ones who benefit. So why should me, as a Zambian sitting at home, care? Well, like I mentioned earlier, there are lots of different reasons. One is just ecosystem. I think the big thing that we have seen this year is the effects of climate change. We have seen how rainfall patterns have changed. If you live in Lusaka, Lusaka was a very hot and dry, almost desert for the last couple of weeks. It only started raining, I think, two weeks ago, and that has impacted our farmers. It will definitely have an impact on how much we harvest and how much food that we have. And that is a direct effect of climate change, of how we treat our natural world. Similarly, with wildlife, we cannot constantly consume, take animals out of the ecosystem and think that the ecosystem will just bounce back. Every animal has a role to play, but especially if you're taking big chunks of the ecosystem out. So when I talked earlier about, problems like snaring, when you are poaching indiscriminately, you're taking lions and leopards and cheetahs, you're taking impala, zebra, kudu in the thousands every day, you're taking hundreds of animals out of the ecosystem. That has a great effect on ecosystem balance. It has effect on the quality of your soil. It has an effect on the diseases that used to cycle through wildlife. I mean, these days we talk a lot about zoonotic diseases and even about COVID-19 being a zoonotic disease. But it's not the only zoonotic disease. There's anthrax, there's Ebola, there's TB that's found in wild animals as well. I know that you're the doctor, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about diseases. That is your specialty. But diseases that used to cycle through nature and end there are now coming to us. So wildlife is important, not just aesthetically, it's beautiful, it's nice to look at, but it has a big effect on the lives that we live today.
Right. Winnie Kanjipita. Quite insightful. We actually need more of such sensitization topics. I hope you are as welcoming and available when one follows you at your office. You people can be rude when we follow you in your offices. Louis, are you rude
No,
at
but
your?
it's a valid concern. I've experienced it. We've all experienced someone being nice on social media and then you meet them in real life. What I will say is, I am the least nice person on my team. I work with a team of very lovely women. So if you think I'm nice, there are much nicer women who are very capable of handling if I'm unavailable, and you can ask as many questions as you need to. We're always here to help.
Will Alfred Mushindi, I hear bushmeat is concealed and preserved using human urine. What are the health complications, Doc? Eh, First of all, do they use human urine?
They have been known to use it because again, I'm not a doctor, but urine does have a strong smell of urea. So if you've smelled bushmeat before, it has a very strong smell of the wood and everything that was used. So we have gotten many reports from people who say that poachers disguise urine using, disguise bushmeat by urinating on it, amongst other things.
Mm, wow. Now, the other question, we will deal with it in due course.
Okay.
Today it's your show. We want you to tell us as many things as you can. What is the next question? All right, ladies and gentlemen, please go ahead and ask us questions. Louis is still here. Uh, I honestly didn't know that poachers use urinate on the urine to on urinate on the meat to preserve it. I didn't know.
Again, I think it goes back to what poachers are trying to achieve. They are not thinking about your health, wellness, and safety. They're just trying to sell you a product, whatever can make them money. And when people get desperate, they will do anything. So now that poaching is becoming more and more of an issue, like I said, our wildlife populations are reducing drastically. And we now have to think about the penalties of wildlife crime, which is why they're so stiff. So poachers are thinking, how can I get away with this? What can I do? How do I make sure the police don't catch me? How do I make sure DNPW or ZAWA don't catch me? They will do anything and everything. And they will do anything and anything to sell a product as well. That's why they will urinate on it, they will smuggle it, they will put it in bags and cars, they will, put it in bags of charcoal. If you're lucky, they will put it amongst soiled blankets or soiled clothes to disguise it. And they, like we keep saying, they will sell you something that is not what they say it is, just to make money.
Right. So, Louis, tell us, if people should forget everything you've said, what should they remember? What should be your take-home message as we come to the end?
I think if you forget anything I've said today, the one thing I would say is legal Zambian game meat is available and that you can buy it, and there is no reason to rely on illegal sources where you don't know what you're eating, you don't know where it's come from. It's not safe for you or for your family. Rather buy from trusted legal sources. And if you're unsure, please send us a message on Facebook or just go to the top of our page. You'll see a list of legal game meat suppliers where you can get the meat from.
Right. Louis, I'd like to thank you for coming. And as we close the show today, I know that you may come back. But for today, I'd like you to reiterate the issue of your campaign and who your target audience are or is for your campaign? Before you go.
Okay. So our target audience is you at home. If you buy bushmeat or if you know someone who does, you are our target audience. And our message is buy Zambian, trust Zambian, buy legal Zambian game meat. Don't put your put your life in the hands of criminals, because criminals unfortunately cannot be trusted. If something is illegal, it's illegal for your own protection. And I know that there's a lot of concerns that we're just, like someone said earlier, promoting or helping rich people get richer. But the average Zambian is the person who suffers the most. They're the ones who get the diseases, or they're the ones who end up in prison, or they're the ones who suffer the adverse effects of the illegal bushmeat trade. We are the ones who are going to suffer if we don't take care of ourselves and our lives. We are the masters of our own destiny. So what I would say is, please visit our page, learn more about legal Zambian game meat, and support legal Zambian businesses.
Right. Louis, I'd like to thank you for coming through, and I'd like to thank your department for bringing out this very important conversation to our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Right. Do take care. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Today we were introducing this very important topic around bushmeat, and you will see quite a number of guests coming on board to discuss this important question, because we want to make consumption of bushmeat safe. That's all there is here. It's for your own good, it's for your own protection, but also it's for sustainability. We cannot continuously continue to indiscriminately, hunt down these animals without giving them room to breed and room to replicate and room to multiply. God forbid that we should come to a point in our lives or in our lifetime where we don't have these animals. And you do realize that nature is such that all species that are in nature depend on each other for survival. Wild animals depend on us for survival. We also depend on them for survival, meaning that all of us need to coexist with these animals for the preservation of our own lives. And I think that's the essence of this conversation. That said, ladies and gentlemen, do us one big favor before you go. I know you're going to have lunch, but do one last activity before you go, or one last act before you leave this conversation. Click that share button. Here's why you need to click it. It is because we need to spread this message. This message needs to reach everyone as much as possible. So click that share button as much as you can before you walk out. Just click that share button. Yes, I've seen you've clicked it, but that one didn't. So click that share button, and until next time, do take care. This has been, Dr. Mujajati discussing with wildlife crime prevention organization, and the goal was to prevent and protect you from unknown and known complications. Until next time, take care.